Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session with the second teacher of the Thought Leadership for Systems Transformation Program 2022. We are very privileged to welcome Mansi Kakkar, who will share some reflections on the collective narrative that our group created last week. And after that, we will have a Q&A session. So with that, Mansi, please, it's your time now.
I want to start by saying that I'm very tuned in to the energy of all your check-ins and the diversity of what was shared. And I want to name an intention of holding that diversity of experience, feeling in the present moment, and hopefully weave something for each of you wherever you're at. So that's my intention. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but that's my intention. Okay. With that said, it was such a delight to read. I have my notes here, so I will look here to make sure I'm following along. It was such a delight for me to read the narrative. And each time I've done this, it's felt like this is the way we should be doing things, where there's some emergence and then there's a build on of that. And one of the phrases I really delighted me was our modus operandi of our cultures was challenged. And to me, that felt very, that's kind of what my work is meant to do. And since there was a resonance there and that was felt, I felt really, okay, keep doing what you're doing. And I have some thoughts. I'm not going to answer specific questions, but based on reading that, some patterns that have emerged as repeating questions, I have pulled out from the work that I've done. Some are concepts, but also woven in a lot of examples. And that's what I'm going to be sharing. And what I want to invite all of us to do as you're listening is to tune in to where you sense resonance. And if resonance is something that is not clear what it is in your own body, you know when you hear something is true. You just know. Your mind might not know it, but your body does. And this might be hard or easy for us depending on where we were born and how we were raised. But I invite you into a practice today as I'm talking to tune into where you resonate with truth. And also, if everything resonates, then that's still the mind, because the resonance comes from a deeper place. Okay, so with that, I want to start by defining regenerative, this word that is used so much. And I myself in my work have been grappling with how do I give words to this. And I've gone in many different directions in my attempt to define it. But I think I've reached a place where there's a definition that accounts for what I said in my last session, that can we have a definition that can work everywhere? Can we have a definition that does not depend on a uniformity of thinking? And so the definition that I want to share is that I see regenerative, this word regenerative, as this incredible ability that is generated when we embody the most evolved potential of being human. So it's an incredible ability generated by embodying the most evolved potential of being human. And the key word for me is most evolved. And when we think of evolution, we do think of it in a linear way. And I think that at each state of evolution, even if you just understand how our bodies were evolved, there's blocks of intelligences that have built upon one on the other. And there is a lot of value in recognizing not just the outcome of where we are and the intelligence we have today, but also all those preceding states of intelligences. So the way I think about this is there is an intelligence in our minds, our cognitive function. There's an intelligence in our bodies. There's an intelligence in our heart. And there's an intelligence, depending on how you might phrase this particular word, that's something more than us, the soul, spirit, the collective, God, universe. There's so many different ways that we denote to that word, but that I wanted to hold space for the intelligence that is generated from that aspect of us. Okay, I wanted to show you a picture of this guy. This ability of really being in that state of most evolved human potential, to me, we call as genius. That's the phrase we use in our common lingo when we say somebody's a genius. What we're trying to say is that this person is embodying the most evolved potential of what it means to be human. But historically, we have ascribed genius to very few people. And I think the paradigm shift that we're going into is where each and every one can tap into that genius in themselves, each and every one. And the quality of being regenerative is we will be more and more regenerative as a species if more and more people are able to live their fullest potential. And I also, as I was thinking about images of people to bring up, there's also a deep gap in women who are identified as genius in our history, which to me was also showing that we need more and more people to step into this quality of being a genius. Okay, so that's one component that I wanted to say, that genius is a democratic right. If you are born in a human body, that is available to you. Now, the way to get to that, there are two things that I want to speak to. The first is what I call alchemical actions. Alchemical actions is, and I think somebody shared, they said a lot of emotions and actions in the last 4 weeks. And it's beautiful because those are the two main components I'm going to speak to, how to get to regenerative from actions and the emotional component. And the metric of an alchemical action is that you have a sense of certainty, a sense of knowingness. And you're going to notice that all the metrics I'm going to give you, asked for metrics in the narrative, all the metrics I'm going to give to you are not going to be cognitive. They're going to be from a sense perception, like how can you know that you are in a state based on your own instrument, and you can know for sure based on your own experience. You can say yes or no very clearly for yourself. And so there's a self-evaluative process for all the metrics that I'm going to give you. And then hopefully somebody in this world will find a way to put that into a measurement structure that we can use as organizations and networks, but that's not my work. So alchemical actions are this state of being in such certainty of what we are doing that it actually creates a ripple effect. And I'm going to show you a couple of images to demonstrate this as we've experienced in our lives recently. Do you know this image? Can you see this image? This person taking this action many years ago, it was 1 year after I was born, 1989, is an alchemical action. Because by them choosing to do this in that moment, there was such certainty. Even when you see the video of this, the tanks try to move past the person and they're just like playfully like get back in front of the tank. And to me, that certainty, that knowingness that this is my alchemical action in this moment, that is us being regenerative. That is this person being regenerative. They're tapping into their most evolved potential. So this is on one side. And then I want to share a second image where this resonance that we feel, where the image of the tank man has endured through generations. Through like literally many people can and will continue as long as we have the internet. This image is going to hold the power that it holds. And on the flip side, we also have resonance when something is happening that is so deeply painful, so deeply troubling that it doesn't matter who we are, where we are in the world. There is going to be almost like we saw with what happened in 2020. That there's going to be a flood of consecutive actions that take place from something like that when there's a resonance on this is not okay. And the collective, all of us as a group, we are more and more aligning with justice. We are more and more aligning with healing. We are more and more aligning with interdependence, whether we see it in the world right now or not. That is what is present. And so resonance for trauma, in the context of trauma and healing, is going to constantly have this effect. And we're seeing it actually right now with the war that is happening. And to me, what I see the biggest power right now is how many alchemical actions are taking place from every different industry, not just from a geopolitical perspective, but from an individual perspective. I'm seeing people activating their networks and their organizations to now completely move in the direction of democracy and how to support the people in Ukraine. So to me, this is a clear example of how you can measure alchemical action when it has this deep resonance across the whole, where more and more people are able to see how what they're giving or they're doing, whether they're a person or whether they're an organization, how they need to step into that. So this is the first idea of how do we get to that state of our most evolved potential, is by recognizing alchemical actions for ourselves. This is the first thing I wanted to share. And the second thing I wanted to share is a phrase that I've coined, and I think there have been variations of this. What I'm going to say is not new. It's perhaps more a new way of saying an old idea, and that is emotional metabolism. Emotional metabolism. And the process of emotional metabolism is a precursor to getting to alchemical action. It's a precursor. And emotional metabolism, the metric is aliveness. You're in a state of metabolizing emotions, whether they are generated in your own field, in your own body, or by the collective and what is happening in the world. There's a strong experience of aliveness. And aliveness is not restricted to positive emotions. It is the full spectrum of emotions, from trauma to enlightenment. All those are in that spectrum of feeling a sense of aliveness. And emotional metabolism is a process for us to get to our integrated truth, which is where our alchemical action springs from. And the biggest shift that needs to happen around this is that emotions are data. They're not good or bad. They're just data, albeit in my humble opinion, the most powerful data. Out of all the data we have in our mind about what's going on, the cognitive function, the emotions and the sensations in our body are the most important data for you to be regenerative by getting to your alchemical action. And for this, I want to use a quick metaphor. And some of you might have seen or heard the fable of the blind man and the elephant. And Maria, you're familiar with this since we worked with this image in the context of systems and systems transformation. But in my last session, I talked about how the dot, the smallest unit of a system, is also a system within itself, if you remember that. So I'm going to now use it in that context. So the metaphor is that if 4 or 5 people who don't have the privilege of sight come across an elephant, and they're just using their sense perception and their sense of touch to understand what this thing is, they're each going to come up with a completely different truth as they feel what this elephant is. And they're each valid, but at the same time, it is the integrated truth of this is an elephant, which only is possible by each of them sharing their individual parts to make the big picture of this is the elephant. Now, that is how emotions are as well. If I have a sense of fear and I have anger, but I also have some hope, all those emotions are data. They're giving me small pictures for me to get to my integrated truth, which is where my alchemical action is going to spring from. And what is this tracking for anybody? It is? Some of you? Okay, great. So seeing all our emotional experiences as data points, but incomplete data points, putting them all together for ourselves, like all the emotions and sensations I have, putting them all together gives me the picture of what is my integrated truth. And I want to share a fable that Joseph Campbell shared in The Power of Myth, to illustrate what emotional metabolism could look like in action. Then I will share a tool that I've crafted for us to get to emotional metabolism. And then I'll share examples of all the things that I've talked about from my own life. So first, the fable. So I want you to picture a Japanese samurai. He has all his armor. And I want you to picture this person as extremely loyal. And as part of his tradition as a samurai, he has vowed to be the protector of this person. And it so happens that through life and circumstance, somebody kills the person that the samurai is sworn to protect. And now the samurai is challenged to step into a place of holding their vow, holding that vow that they are supposed to protect this person, but they now have to, by the tradition's rules, find and kill this person. And so this samurai is going from tavern to tavern and street to street trying to find this person. And they find the person who had killed this person who was so deeply important to the samurai. And as he approaches the perpetrator, he removes his sword and he's about to fatally kill this person. In a state of panic, the perpetrator spits on the samurai's face. And what the samurai does is he sheaths his sword, he turns around and leaves. I want you to sit with that action, that choice. The reason the samurai did that is because in that moment, he did emotional metabolism. And that is this: he recognized that now, because of this person spitting on me, I have anger towards this person in my system. And if I take an action of killing him, my action is diluted. It is not just for what I have sworn, which is protection. It is now a personal attack as well. And to me, what we need in the world is a renaissance of alchemical action, which is only possible by working through emotional metabolism, which doesn't mean the anger he was feeling was wrong. It was true. He needed to metabolize that emotion before he stepped into doing the very act he would go back and do later. So to me, this is an important lesson for us, that we need to be able to get to our integrated truth and not just our truth of felt sensations and emotions. And therefore emotions, there was a question in here about, should we then hold on to our emotions or let go or something like that? And your emotions are your most powerful ally. Unless and until you don't experience the anger fully and place it next to the hope, next to your sense of wonder, next to your sense of all other emotions that you might be experiencing today's reality, you're not going to be able to get to your alchemical action. You might still act, you might still make choices, but will they reach that element of resonance that I showed you with the first two images? My prediction is no. And we're trying in this conversation to find a predictable, measurable way to regenerate on a mass scale, right? At scale. And for us to do that, these are the tools that my relationship with my own emotions and life have brought forth. Okay, so that was the fable. And now I want to share with you a tool that I've created to get to emotional metabolism. And I might not share much of it, but just kind of give you a glimpse. And then I'll go into examples. Okay. Oh, and one thought I forgot to say is emotional metabolism. The metric for emotional metabolism is relief. You experience as relief. When you've gotten to your integrated truth, your body just goes, ah. Okay. All right. So there's the picture of the samurai for you. And what I'm going to focus on is these statements. Each of these statements are meant to be emotional maps where the bolded word is where we want to reach as an embodied state. And the other two emotions, fear, apathy, anger, grief, blame, guilt, hope, hopelessness, are information we're going to use. And the tool we're going to use is the fourth word, courage, curiosity, responsibility, or wonder. And I'm going to just speak through one in depth, and I can make these available online in some way. So I'm going to use this one because this is the one that's most present for me, uncovering love by listening to anger and grief with curiosity. The current situation of what's happening in the world has brought up a lot of grief and a lot of anger in my field. And in making space of looking at that anger, looking at that grief with curiosity, I have found that my truth, my integrated truth, is this deep love, deep love for freedom. That is my integrated truth, that I want people all over the world to experience the sovereignty of having sovereignty over their own bodies and over their own lives. And as I think about that, I am now able to choose my actions of, okay, if that is my truth, then what actions do I take which help replicate that intention? Versus, which I have done in the past, what actions does my anger want me to take? What actions does my grief want me to take? And those are actions that I take mostly within the context of my own experience. But in terms of building resonance, because everything you put online, everything you do, every action you take is feeding into the collective nervous system. It's a huge responsibility today, huge responsibility. And so how to make alchemical actions from a place of integrated love, that is what I'm trying to seek. So this is a tool I use personally, and you can see there was a question around hope and hopelessness, and the fourth one would be relevant to whoever is in that space, that embodying presence beyond hope and hopelessness with wonder. And I'll speak to that really quickly. Hope and hopelessness have the same energy, which might be alarming to hear, but they're both looking at the future, and one says it's positive and the other says it's negative, but they're the same energy. They're both looking at the future. And what I want to invite us into is presence, being extremely present with the reality of what is happening today, but with wonder of how can we use the transformative ingredients present, and they are present, really deeply present, to get to our place of alchemical actions. All right, so with this, I'm going to share quick examples from my own life, projects, of where all of this has played out, and then we'll open it for questions. So the biggest example of emotional metabolism in my life has been my relationship with my mom. I'm really sad to say that there was a point in my life when I have used this phrase that I hate my mom. I have used this phrase. And the reason for that was that there was so much blame in my being towards the choices that my mom made that I was unable to feel the connection. It was so fragmented, my relationship with my mom. And for most of my adult life, we've hardly spoken, like once in a while here and there. But as this, the emotional metabolism tool was coming into my sphere, I realized how that was a relationship that deeply needed this. And I worked through it. And I'm so proud to say today, My mom is the first person I speak to. She's the first person who listens to my poetry for the first time, and I'm able to feel her love. I couldn't feel her love for the longest time. And I share this as an example of the question that was asked around, I value relationships and networks, and how does that play out in my own experience? I cannot be in a state of integrated truth when even one of the relationships around me that are biological without choice, as well as those with choice, where there is an element of a fragmentedness. I can't be in a state of alchemical action if relationships are more true than my individual experience. Then I need all the relationships around me to be in that state of regenerative, expressing the fullest potential. And I have to say, a lot of my work now is impacted by the thoughts my mom shares with me. I could have never gotten to that state. Her wisdom is tessellating into my work. The second example, and I'm going to share my screen to show you this. This is a email that I received from this organization called Changing the Conversation. Anybody familiar with Changing the Conversation? Yeah. This organization, I had the great privilege of volunteering for, and they use the power of conversations to tackle some of the most polarizing topics in our country. And I received this email. I want you to note the date. It was a very big moment, November 6, 2020. So this is around the time where the presidency of the US was being determined. And we were in a very volatile and precarious moment in our country. And just by the power of conversations, we were able to, and I can speak to specific examples on phone calls that I was making, where we were speaking to people on various political ideology, holding various political ideology. But the one that was most polarizing for me was when I was speaking to somebody who identified as Republican. And I was amazed in that conversation to learn that that person was just a person like me, had the same worries as me, wanted to make sure their children were fed, and they had a state of freedom in how they chose and what they were able to do. And I was like, I resonate with that. That's what is true for me too. And that experience made me see that how the narrative and the polarization is like, it's almost like in the air, but it isn't in the essence and the truth of who we are. And so I find this organization, Changing the Conversation, is a powerful example of an organization that's being regenerative, where they're not assuming that just because we think differently, we cannot find a way of connecting and relating with each other. In fact, we can, and that's the very thing that creates change. Then there was another question in the narrative about individualism versus collectivism. So I want to share this picture because I love it. On one side, we have individualism, which is the separated twigs and the little, I don't know what they're called, the green pieces that go onto the twig. And then on the other side, we have it whole. And to me, rather than answering the question for you, which one is more healthy? Which one is more powerful? Which one is more beautiful, aesthetically and experientially? And from that, I let you choose which one, individualism versus collectivism, which is better. I know what my choice is. And the important part to note is that the individualism is not attacked or diluted in the image of the twig with all of it together as it should be, as it's whole. There's individual is part of it. It's inherent. So it's not a one or the other, it's both. But that's the order or chaos, as you might call it, that gives us that. A few more examples. This is an example from sort of healthcare, but also business a little bit. And it's an organization called Brazil Child Health. I don't know if the two of you who said you're from Sao Paulo, if you're familiar with it. But in 1991, Berrett-Koehler, who was a physician, was taking in a lot of children as patients, and she would notice that the same children kept coming again and again and again and again. And the normal course of action for most physicians would be to build more hospitals and find more ways to treat them. But Vera sort of tuned into all the emotions that she was feeling and found that, no, I need to learn more. And she went and actually lived with some of those kids or understood what is happening. And what she realized that she cannot just treat the health conditions of these children. She needs to look at housing. She needs to look at income generation. She needs to look at citizenship, at education. Does this sound familiar for anybody that's done any work in development? Issues are interrelated. And then she actually created a program where they were working on all these issues that were surrounding these kids together. So it was not an easy solution. It was looking at a very holistic, integrated approach to solving the problem. And they actually found 92% increase in family income, 90% increase in home ownership, as well as 86% decrease in number of days that the children spent in hospital. So to me, that's an example of alchemical action that is integrated and looking at the systemic nature of a problem and attacking or solving it from that place of integration. How do we look at the whole and try to solve for that? And the other example I'm going to give you is from technology, Bitcoin, love it or hate it, but not necessarily the crypto asset category, but the technology of Bitcoin. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but if you look at the design of Bitcoin, what makes it so powerful as a decentralized system is that it's actually integrating trust into the solution. And because it's integrating trust into the solution, the more the solution scales, the better it gets at solving the problem it's trying to solve. So that's a metric for you of how we can, if we're really trying to transform systems at scale, whatever solution we put forth should get stronger with time. So the more people use the solution we're creating, the better that solution gets at solving the problem. So that's another example. And the last example I want to give is of an organization called Daily Dump, based out of India, Bangalore. And what this organization is trying to work towards is building habits of composting, which is non-existent in India. Breaks my heart that that's the country I come from, and it's true. For most of my life living in India, we did not compost. And the solution that they've created is, one, they've created a system where you buy into a program, you get a thing, the container in which you can compost, but more importantly, they've identified all the emotional blocks that would stop a person from composting. So a person might not want to deal with the dirt and all of that. Okay, if you buy our subscription, a person will come every 2 weeks and do it for you. Okay, you don't want to compost because what's the benefit? We can buy the compost from you and you get to make money. They've literally taken all the emotional blocks around composting and they've created a solution that helps people metabolize those emotions. And that therefore building the habit of composting. So to me, this is another example of regenerative innovation, essentially, where the solution is accounting and not saying, no, you need to be better, you need to change your habits, but it's designing around the reality of people. I hope these examples were helpful for you to ground the ideas of alchemical action and emotional metabolism in the context of system transformation.
Beautiful. Thank you, Mansi. So let's take a couple of minutes and then we'll go for questions.
I really wanted to just ask, we've been using the word wonder and also curiosity and passion. So to bring up the witness of, whether we're working with kids or adults. And I'm just curious, I like that you use the word wonder. I want to hear more.
Thanks for the question, Lynn. I haven't put this stuff, the emotional metabolism is still, I'm trying to find examples for each before I put it, because one of my goals with anything that I put out is it's not just on a conceptual level, and is really the how. Fedor, you and me used to call the how of the how of the how. Get to this is how. So I don't have it available as yet, but I will make it available very soon. But my thoughts about wonder and witnessing. If we think about evolution, mutation is a form of wonder. It's like this fanciful, what if we do this? It's got a very playful energy to it. And so in the context of, it sounds like you're working with children and families, I think playfulness is the very powerful tool to bring in wonder. And the second component of the idea of witnessing, and I think I almost want to have you talk more about it so I can understand in the context of the work you do specifically. But the tool of emotional metabolism and the idea of is actually getting us into a state of witnessing of what's happening for us and getting into that observer level. And from that place, we're able to see how our grief feeds our wonder, how our anger feeds our curiosity. We can see those interconnections, which is really only possible when we are a little detached from the energy of those emotions. And by detached, I don't mean suppressing, repressing. I mean, it's present and we're just witnessing what is present. So those would be my really short wonderings on wonder and witnessing.
I would like to know how we can improve the emotional metabolism. If there are some exercises or things like that that we can connect with ourselves to improve in the sense.
Great question. My favorite tool or favorite practice is, and this is not mine, it's everyone's, it's been taught many times in different ways. Whenever we have a emotional response, so I'm going to give an example. A few days ago, my supervisor in my job posted something about systems change and systems transformation. And when they posted that, my response was like, oh, this is my work. They didn't ask me. There was and what the emotion that came up was just feeling unseen, feeling undervalued. And the tool I've used is, okay, there's this, I'm feeling unseen, I'm feeling unvalued. Okay, that's the story is my boss did, that's the story, that's the narrative. But to go to a deeper component, so there's the narrative, there's the emotion, but then there's the sensation. And in my body, the sensation of feeling unvalued was like there's this fire in my stomach. And you have to use metaphor to describe sensation. So there's a fire in my stomach, and to just witness that fire in the stomach and just be present with it. And then the narrative and the emotion is integrated. It just is. So using this practice every day, I'm using it all the time, even in meetings, is a game changer. So that's how I would recommend increasing emotional metabolism.
Hi, yes. As an educator, I work with deaf children on a reservation in Central America, so tribal deaf children. And so I love your visuals and your tactile, just different ways of describing things. So I'm just wondering, teaching children, like in an educational setting, what kind of building blocks could you put, young, that would be appropriate in starting to build this language and being really comfortable and literate in this emotional metabolism. What would you do, especially like visually, because I can use sign language to teach even better than linear language. Would be really profound.
I almost want to say, let's workshop that together. That's so exciting to me to play in. How would I approach that? I almost want to say that the inability to see is almost a strength in emotional metabolism. And so I'm almost like, I don't have an answer, but my curiosity would be around what can we learn in how those who don't have sense of sight, how do they work through emotions themselves? And I think we would learn tools there for us to be better at doing it ourselves. Again, I don't have an answer, but that's my curiosity is in that there's a strength in that, and how can we learn from that strength and make these ideas of emotional metabolism even stronger for all of us. But if you want a workshop, let me know. I totally want to do that.
The whole story about the mental metabolism initiated such question. So concerning that you're proposing to connect the dots by the different emotional points or projections, right? And we're summarizing projections and we have some kind of holistic view. And after such a new or extended view, action is needed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And action sometimes comes from different places, right?
Mm-hmm.
From body. If I want to run from something, it's my body response. From my emotion or from my mental. What are your thoughts on holistic actioning? How to add all that holistic way of thinking, but I'm not talking about the only mental thinking, right? Yeah. It should be emotional thinking and body thinking and all the sum of that ways. For example, if I want to do, it doesn't matter what or what to do right now. For me here in Russia, right? Many of people, they are thinking, what should I do? From my emotional side, from my body side, from my thoughts. What's your view on this holistic approach of actioning?
If somebody is practicing the ability to map the intelligence across all those domains, and emotional metabolism helps you do that, then you are essentially, and this is where I'm going to get a little esoteric, so bear with me. I might lose some of you, or maybe not. If the largest system is the same pattern in the smallest system of my system, if you remember the dot, the smallest unit of a system is not an individual, it's a system, then whatever is in the field, the largest field, is here. It just is. And this is just comes from a principle in most Zen philosophies, Vedantic philosophies, of how the world is a reflection of what we experience in here. But that is an extremely, it's such a powerful place to be, which means that the more we integrate our reality and our experiences and our system, whatever action we take is going to be that much more regenerative for the larger system. So my invitation to your questioning, especially where you are and what's going on, is give yourself the space and the time to become very intimate with each and every emotion, each and every sensation, each and every thought on all those levels that are present for you, for your experience and your reality. And don't try to get to the action. Just stay in witnessing, stay in like what is true for me in all of these different ways. And you will reach a state where you won't have any question of what the action is. You just won't. You will reach a state, the more you've integrated, you will reach a state where you'll just know. Remember, the metric of alchemical action is knowingness. You just know. And there'll be no part of you that's like, is this the right thing to do or not? You'll be like, I know this is the right thing to do. I just need to figure out how. And there might be fear around how to do it or those sort of things. So that's my invitation to you. Slowness, take the time, integrate as many of those parts of you that are coming, the thoughts. There might be completely conflicting emotions and thoughts and actions. Sit with both of them, like date one for a little bit, then date the other one for a little bit. And the action will become visible. I hope that's helpful.
What comes up for me hearing this is impact. In that chemistry, one of the things I see is this kind of like, almost like, you know, like I just go quiet. So much impact that I go quiet. And I was interested in how you see the choice process. Which of the many ingredients in that chemistry do I choose? How do I witness the elements that are on the weaker side of the power structure versus the stronger side of the power structure? On and on and on.
Oof, very powerful question, Maria. Oof. Okay. Oh God, you're not gonna like me. The points which we resist the most, the emotions we resist the most, the perspectives we resist the most, are the closest to our alchemical action. Just sit with that for a second. Because what you resist persists. So when if you're at a choice point, which one is your mind being like, oh, I know that's not, that's not important, or it's like, oh, definitely not that. Then oh, ding, ding, ding. That's the direction in which I need to be in metabolism with. So resistance is one, surety is another. If you're so certain, and there's a certainty there are two kinds of certainties I experience in myself. One is a mental cognitive certainty, which is always fear trying to be like, no, we've got this. But there's a certainty which comes from your body. And I want you to start discerning if there's certainty of cognition, of mind. Oh boy, some emotional metabolism. Yep. Integration is needed.
Thank you so much. Let's move to our closing remarks.
I don't know if this has become apparent or not, but the ideas of emotional metabolism and alchemical action, if you see them, they are essentially the feminine principle, emotional metabolism, alchemical action, the masculine principle, yin yang, whatever language, wave, particle, if you're sciencey, whatever language you use, it is those two components. And so being regenerative as a being, and the fullest potential of yours is your ability to integrate those two. Where there is so much power, the emotional metabolism gets you to truth, and action from truth builds resonance on a systemic level. Then your solution and what you're doing, your program actually doesn't matter. If you think about it, it is more the place from which you are doing things. And when you're in a place of integration, and that's the place from which you're doing things, whatever you do will create systemic resonance. It will. I want you to trust that. So I'll give you that sort of esoteric frame as well of how I've patterned these two components. The last thing, is there hope? Is there fear? Are we doomed? I want to speak to that. If you identify as life, then you are far, far, far from doomed. Because life will always out more life. If you are identified as an identity, a person with certain preferences, and that's your core, so that's where you function from, then I am sorry to say, but you are doomed, because that's not going to live into the regenerative paradigm. So with that, hopefully I scared some of you, or at least some of them who will hear the recording. Thank you for your presence, your questions, your listening.